Everyone thinks America is more dangerous because of guns. But what if I told you that in England and Wales, police recorded over 50,000 knife crimes in a single year? Official data from the Office for National Statistics shows over 50,000 knife-related offenses in the year to March 2024. So does that make England and Wales more dangerous than the United States? Or is there more going on beneath the headlines? In this video, we'll compare the numbers people rarely see, Baltimore's homicide decline, London's knife wave, and ask where the real risks lie. And the first surprise begins with America itself. Numbers versus fear, the U.S. crime puzzle. Why do so many people in the United States feel like crime is spiraling when the long-term numbers tell a different story? Violent victimization fell from about 79.8 per 1,000 people in 1993 to about 22.5 per 1,000 in 2023. The decline is dramatic, yet when you ask Americans, most still believe violence is getting worse. That mismatch between perception and reality has become one of the most puzzling features of the U.S. crime debate. The National Crime Victimization Survey helps cut through the confusion. Instead of only tallying police reports, it asks people directly if they've been victims, even if they never contacted the police. This provides a wider, more accurate view of how crime is actually experienced. And it reveals something important. In 2023, there were 6.4 million violent victimizations. So yes, violence today is far below the levels of the 1990s, but the sheer number of incidents remains high enough that millions live with the risk of becoming victims every single year. Both the progress and the persistence matter, even if they don't fit neatly into headlines. Geography sharpens that contrast. National averages hide wide gaps. The NCVS shows violent victimization hit about 29.6 per 1,000 in urban areas compared with 15.3 per 1,000 in rural areas. And when you zoom further in, cities like Baltimore or Detroit sit far above the national curve. For residents there, crime statistics feel very different from what the average American experiences. Reporting adds another layer to the puzzle. About 45% of violent victimizations were reported to police in 2023. That means more than half of what happens never enters official records. People compare what they see day to day with what's released by law enforcement, and when those versions don't align, trust breaks down. Firearms deepen the impact of fear. About 9% of violent victimizations involved a gun in 2023, roughly 575,000 incidents. Most involve robberies or assaults, but culturally, the focus often lands on the rare and devastating mass shootings. These high-profile events shape how danger feels, even though the everyday numbers tell a more routine story. Where you live still colors the experience most. In many small towns, crime isn't central to daily thinking. In cities, it can feel like an unavoidable backdrop. Together, media coverage, missed reporting, and concentrated violence in certain communities keep the perception of danger far higher than the national averages suggest. So while the long-term picture confirms America is safer than 30 years ago, the shadow of fear still hangs heavy across the country. Which leads to another pressing question. If the U.S. is defined by guns, how does a country without that same level of firearm access experience crime? Blades in the shadows, the UK crime reality. Is Britain really free from serious danger, or does it face risks that numbers alone don't always reveal? Police recorded knife-enabled offenses in England and Wales were about 50,510 in the year to March 2024. Instead of gun violence dominating headlines, it's knives that shape both the statistics and much of the public's sense of threat. That steady figure shows how blades, whether in robberies, assaults, or domestic arguments, remain part of everyday safety concerns. At first glance, Britain looks safer if you focus only on homicides. Measured per person, England and Wales record fewer than 10 homicides per million people, while in the United States the rate is several times higher, around 68 per million. That gap is clear, but fewer murders overall don't mean violence is absent. What stands out are frequent lower-level knife incidents that shape daily safety. A robbery near an ATM or a fight outside a nightclub in London is much more likely to involve a blade than a firearm. And that ongoing possibility leaves its own mark on daily life. London illustrates the scale most visibly. The Metropolitan Police, covering a population of nearly 9 million, accounts for close to 30% of all knife offenses nationwide. For residents moving through crowded trains or late-night streets, the risk isn't of sudden gunfire, but of a heated argument escalating into a stabbing. This reality shapes how people think about safety when crossing the city at night. Violence in the UK also appears in private spaces. CSEW estimates show about 4.8% of adults experience domestic abuse and about 2.1% experience sexual assault in the latest period. These cases rarely make national headlines, but they underscore that danger is not confined to public confrontations with strangers. For many, the greater risks are in relationships or households. It's important to note how this data gets tracked. Survey and police methods have changed in recent years, so some year-to-year comparisons aren't exact. But the broad pattern is clear. Knife-related incidents and hidden forms of violence appear persistently across reports. The effect is a landscape where homicides remain relatively rare, but violence is still present in many people's lives. What emerges is a nuanced picture. Britain's homicide rate is low, yet knife offenses surface repeatedly in homes, on trains, and outside bars. People may not face the possibility of mass shootings, but they confront a different atmosphere of risk tied to blades and encounters that escalate suddenly. The danger differs in profile, not in its capacity to unsettle daily life. And once you zoom in further, the differences sharpen. To understand how residents actually live with these risks, it helps to move beyond whole country averages and look directly at the cities where the experience of violence is concentrated most. Cities on edge, Baltimore versus London. Which places stand out as the most dangerous? America's firearm-heavy cities or Britain's knife crime hotspots? Baltimore and London give a sharp contrast that highlights how danger feels very different depending on where you live. Baltimore's numbers make the scale clear. By the end of 2024, it recorded 201 homicides. For a city of its size, that translates to a homicide rate of about 35 per 100,000 people, one of the highest in the United States. In certain neighborhoods, the concentration of gun violence means risk is visible in daily life. The totals may look small compared to the whole U.S., but the per capita rate shows why Baltimore often comes up in debates about urban danger. London tells another story. With close to 9 million people, it saw fewer homicides per capita than Baltimore, yet faces a different challenge. Police data shows London records tens of thousands of knife offenses yearly, with the Metropolitan Police area accounting for roughly 30% of all knife incidents in England and Wales. These aren't spread evenly across the city. Trouble is concentrated around busy nightlife areas, transport hubs, and districts where gang tensions run high. For many Londoners, the worry isn't sudden gunfire, but an argument escalating into a stabbing. U.S. cities beyond Baltimore reveal the range of extremes. In 2024, Detroit sat in the high 30s per 100,000 people, while St. Louis reached close to the high 40s. These concentrated rates underscore why smaller American cities can rival or even surpass the risks of much larger urban centers. On the British side, cities such as Birmingham and Manchester report some of the highest knife-related figures, although their homicide rates remain far lower than the U.S. examples. The contrast shows two parallel realities: American cities where gun violence drives very high murder rates, and British cities where knives dominate everyday threats but rarely reach the same lethal scale. What counts as dangerous depends on which measurement you think matters most. That uneven pattern complicates how outsiders interpret safety. A tourist visiting Times Square in New York or walking near Westminster Abbey in London is typically at very low risk. Local police data shows crime clusters tightly within certain neighborhoods, meaning visitors in central areas are more shielded from the dangers that residents in high-violence districts face. Safety is less about the country itself and more about the specific part of the city you're in. Taken together, Baltimore, Detroit, and St. Louis showcased the U.S. struggle with concentrated gun homicide, while London, Birmingham, and Manchester illustrate how knife crime shapes the daily reality in Britain. Neither side of the Atlantic holds the clear title of more dangerous. Both reveal how violence concentrates in certain forms and certain places, while national averages smooth over the sharper edges. Which brings us to the bigger takeaway. The real question isn't whose cities look worse, but what kind of risk people live with, and how those risks shape what safety feels like. Safety isn't about declaring one country more dangerous than the other. It's about recognizing the different kinds of risks people face. There is no simple answer. The U.S. struggles with higher firearm homicide rates, while the U.K. faces persistent knife offenses and domestic violence. So, the safe choice depends on the city and the type of risk. Both countries show long-term declines in homicide compared to decades ago, yet thousands still experience violent victimization each year. Question the headlines, read the numbers, and then tell us which risk you'd choose. Would you feel safer avoiding guns or avoiding knives? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this video changed your perspective, hit like and subscribe for more global risk breakdowns.